Imagine waking up 30,000 years ago. There's no grocery store, no farm, no backup plan. The winter has lasted longer than expected. The animals have disappeared, and your family hasn't eaten in days. Every step drains what little energy you have left. Hunger isn't just a feeling anymore. It's a slow death. Then someone in your tribe dies. At that moment, you face a decision almost impossible for us to imagine today. Do you bury the body? Or do you use it to keep the rest of your family alive? As horrifying as that sounds, archaeology tells us this wasn't just a nightmare. In some parts of the prehistoric world, ancient humans really did eat other humans. But here's the part that surprises most people. They didn't always do it because they were starving. In many cases, the reasons were far more complex and far more human than you might expect. For centuries, stories about cannibals were dismissed as myths meant to scare children or demonize distant tribes. But over the last few decades, archaeologists have uncovered evidence that completely changed that view. Human bones discovered in caves across Spain, France, Belgium, England, and other parts of Europe show the same cut marks found on butchered animals. Some bones were carefully stripped of meat with stone tools. Others were smashed open to reach the nutrient-rich marrow inside. Even skulls had been broken in ways suggesting the brain was intentionally removed. To scientists, these weren't random marks. They were unmistakable signs that human bodies had been processed just like any other source of food. Now, before you imagine ancient humans as bloodthirsty monsters, it's important to remember the world they lived in. Life wasn't just difficult, it was unbelievably brutal. Ice Age winters could last for months. Entire herds of animals sometimes vanished. A failed hunt could mean days or even weeks without food. There were no emergency supplies, no hospitals, no government aid. Survival depended entirely on what nature was willing to provide. And sometimes, nature provided nothing. So here's a question for you. If you knew your children would die within a few days unless they ate something, would your morals stay exactly the same? Or would survival force you to make a choice you can't even imagine today? Be honest. I genuinely love to know your answer in the comments. But hunger isn't the whole story. This is where things become even more fascinating. Archaeologists have found evidence suggesting that some ancient groups practiced cannibalism even when food was available. Why would anyone do that? The answer lies in belief. Many early societies saw death very differently than we do today. In some cultures, consuming a small part of a deceased family member was considered an act of love and respect. They believed the spirit of the dead continued living through those who consumed them. Rather than abandoning a loved one to decay in the ground, they believed they were keeping them close forever. It sounds disturbing from our perspective, but cultural traditions often seem perfectly normal to the people living them. Other groups believed eating a defeated enemy transferred their strength, courage, or wisdom. If a powerful warrior had fallen in battle, consuming part of his body wasn't seen as an insult. It was believed to pass on his power. Whether these beliefs were true didn't matter. What mattered was that people believed them. Human history has always been shaped by stories as much as facts, but nature had a hidden trap waiting for those who practiced cannibalism. Inside the human brain are unusual proteins called prions. Unlike bacteria or viruses, prions aren't alive, and cooking doesn't destroy them. If infected brain tissue is eaten, these proteins can trigger devastating brain diseases. One of the most famous examples is Kuru, a disease once found among the Fore people of Papua New Guinea. Victims slowly lost control of their muscles, developed uncontrollable laughter, became unable to walk or speak, and eventually died. Scientists later connected the disease to funerary cannibalism, where family members consumed parts of deceased relatives as part of funeral rituals. Once the practice stopped, new cases of the disease almost disappeared. In a way, evolution itself may have punished one of humanity's oldest survival strategies. So if cannibalism existed for thousands of years, what finally caused humans to leave it behind? The answer wasn't a single invention or a single law. It was a chain of changes that slowly transformed civilization. The biggest turning point was agriculture. Around 12,000 years ago, humans began farming crops and domesticating animals. Food became more reliable. Instead of wondering whether tomorrow's hunt would fail, communities could store grain and raise livestock. Starvation didn't disappear, but it became far less common. As villages grew into cities, religion also changed the way people viewed the human body. Many belief systems declared the body sacred, even after death. Burial rituals replaced older traditions, and respect for the dead became deeply woven into culture. Then came laws. As civilizations expanded, maintaining order became more important than tribal revenge or ancient customs. Cannibalism gradually became illegal, unacceptable, and eventually unthinkable. Science added another layer. As humans began understanding disease, it became clear that consuming human tissue wasn't just morally controversial, it could also be deadly. Knowledge replaced superstition, and medicine reinforced cultural taboos. Perhaps the biggest change of all, however, happened inside the human mind. As societies became larger and more connected, people began seeing strangers as fellow humans instead of outsiders or enemies. Empathy expanded beyond family and tribe. Behaviors that once helped small groups survive no longer had a place in growing civilizations. Looking back, it's tempting to judge ancient humans by modern standards, but that's probably the biggest mistake we can make. They weren't evil. They weren't monsters. They were people trying to survive in a world harsher than anything most of us will ever experience. The choices they made reflected the reality they faced, not the comfort we enjoy today. And maybe that's the most fascinating lesson of all. Human behavior isn't fixed. It changes with the environment. Change the world around people, and you often change what they believe is right, wrong, necessary, or impossible. So here's one final question I'd like you to think about. If you had been born 30,000 years ago, raised with those beliefs, surrounded by that kind of suffering, and forced to fight for survival every single day, do you really believe you would have acted differently? Or would you have done exactly what they did? Let me know your answer in the comments. Some people will say, never. Others might say, survival changes everything. Either way, this debate has been going on for decades, and I'd love to hear where you stand. And if you enjoy uncovering the strangest and darkest chapters of human history, make sure to subscribe, because history is filled with stories that are far more unbelievable than fiction.